Good morning and welcome to the Daily Devo for Monday, the 18th of September today. Our devotion is entitled Lord of the Sabbath. Lord of the Sabbath. There's quotes from Matthew, or passages from Matthew and Mark and Luke, all three. The verse quoted today is from Mark chapter 2, verses 27 and 28. The Sabbath was made for man, not man for the Sabbath. So the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath. There were strict Jewish laws about the Sabbath, and then some of the religious leaders decided they'd make them even tougher and add more restrictions. Rules about a Sabbath day's journey was 7/8 of a mile, basically, something like that. And if you walked further than that on the Sabbath, you'd broken the law. Just all kinds of crazy stuff. But it made, as Jesus alludes in that verse, made man subservient to that when it's the other way around. The Old Testament law code is perfect. Life is not. This creates tension between the law and life. For first century Judaism, that tension was most keenly felt in Sabbath observance. It was one of the three defining elements of Judaism, besides circumcision and the kosher diet, and is mentioned frequently in the Gospels. In these verses, we read about four conflicts between a rigid observing of Sabbath law and the realities of life. First, no work was to be done on Sabbath, Exodus 20, verse 10. Yet the Lord directed Israel's clergy to, quote unquote, work by offering sacrifices in Numbers chapter 28, verses 9 and 10. Second, livestock wandered into harm's way on Sabbath just as often as any other day of the week. When a sheep fell into a well, people did not wait until the Sabbath was over to pull it out. And third, when Jesus' disciples began picking grain, the Pharisees charged them with sinning. They did not accuse them of stealing, but of harvesting and processing grain on Sabbath. 2 of the 39 forms of work Judaism came to prohibit on Sabbath. And fourth, the Pharisees accused Jesus of, quote unquote, working by healing a disabled man who was worshiping in the synagogue on Sabbath. Jesus did not deny the tensions that existed between the directives of the law involving Sabbath and life. Instead, he responded to the accusation of the Pharisees in two powerful ways. First, he spoke of his own identity. He declared that he was Lord of the Sabbath in Matthew 12:8. Think about what that means for this conversation. God established the Sabbath day at creation and then put laws in place regarding its observance. Because Jesus is God, he has the right to define what the day means and resolve apparent tensions between the law and life. Second, Jesus provided the governing principle for resolving tensions over what one could do on Sabbath. It was meant to be a day of rest, a day of worship, a day of restoration, inward restoration. But when there was an opportunity to show love for others, love was more important than ritual. This is the danger they'd gotten into, but what I think sometimes can be a curse that we don't realize we've taken on, and that is to be so legalistic. We don't show love. We don't do what needs to be done for someone else. We don't do what needs to be done for our own selves. We can't just simply follow rules and regulations all the time because life doesn't allow that. Life doesn't allow that. For a long time, Sue and I have had the practice of we don't go out to eat on a Sunday because those people need a break too. That's not a law. That's just our perspective. We don't want to be the cause of people having to work on Sunday, thereby maybe they wanted to go to church, but they had to work. We don't want to make that be a necessity. But when we have company in, when people come to town for a visit, they want to take us out to eat on Sunday, okay. Okay, we're not going to tell them no. It's not a I'll take a bullet for it kind of thing. It's just a personal sense that we don't want to inconvenience others on that day. And that's what the law is to be like. And again, the things posted there or the things mentioned here, if your prize animal fell into the well, would just leave it there until the next day? Of course you wouldn't. And Jesus had a man that needed to be healed, and Jesus wasn't going to put him off a day. He did it. And that's where we need to have a spiritual maturity, a, an understanding of what's necessary and what can be set aside if need be. Again, we're not talking about sin here. We're talking about just the practices of life. What is okay one day may need to be tweaked the next day for whatever reason. But again, we're not talking sin. We're simply talking about rules and regulations. It gives us freedom for sure, but we don't want to take our freedom, as the scripture would say, and abuse it and use it for wrong either. And so there needs to be this balance. Our author's point for today's devotion was the tension between Sabbath laws and life is best resolved by erring on the side of love. I like it. Blessings to you today on this Monday.